This week on YCN Vermont Wrap, we'll take a look at a few of the top news stories from the past week, and we're going to forego the interview for an extended political potpourri segment. With the primary less than 1 week away, we're going to have a much-needed discussion about civility, something that a quick glance at the political and special interest group pages on social media will highlight in an all-too-mind-numbing fashion. Discourse and disagreement have degenerated into all-out viciousness, with some people appearing to have forgotten that once this election passes, we're still going to have to live with one another. From individuals right on up to leaders within various Republican organizations, the infighting and, in one case, elitism is out of control, and it's got to be addressed. So we'll do that here tonight. YCN Vermont Wrap is on now. Come on, let's go do this. Welcome back to YCN Vermont Wrap. I'm Keith Hanson. With less than 1 week to go until Vermont's primary election, the Republican Governors Association has now dumped over $1 million into the Stronger Vermont PAC war chest. Now, when you consider that this is roughly a third of what was spent originally back in 2016 by the two organizations to help Governor Phil Scott win his governor's seat, it doesn't really seem like a lot. And evidently, spending only 1/3 of what was stroked during the last election cycle serves as quite the statement about what they see as Scott's chances of winning re-election and the field of people seeking the governor's job. I did reach out to Governor Stott's office, both directly and via proxy. The governor's aide, Brittany, has yet to reach back out. This past Thursday night, Democratic candidate for governor James Ehlers broke from the rest of the progressive PAC to express doubts about the effectiveness of the package of bills colloquially known as S-55. Although seemingly purposely vague, as he didn't expand much beyond a simple statement of, and I quote, "There are elements of S-55 that aren't going to make things safer." Now, I don't know if that's in an attempt, albeit vain, to win over converts from the moderate and right sides of the aisle, but I suspect that it's not going to make that big of a difference when you consider Ehlers' standpoints on other hot-button topics. That televised debate, posted online at Vermont's PBS affiliate, also featured Christine Hallquist, Brenda Siegel, and the child, Ethan Sonneborn, bleating like anxious farm animals about how wonderful the package of bills were and how Vermont needs even more gun control measures, including bans on assault weapons. Meanwhile, Vermont's very own patriarch of progressivism, the staunch supporter of democratic socialism and inspiration to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, broke yet another promise this week. You may recall that back in May, the septuagenarian millionaire socialist hypocrite announced that he would, quote, formally kick off his campaign with a series of rallies around the state, end quote. 11 weeks following the release of that announcement, nary a rally has been held. And according to Burns' campaign manager, Shannon Jackson, the aging agitator chose instead to attend community events rather than hold rallies of his own. Now, it's amazing. His campaign is much like the tired message that he preaches, and much like the system that he advocates for. It makes promises that it cannot and will not ever deliver upon. Just chew on that for a minute. And as a side note, Byrne plans on using the Democratic Party as a mechanism for advancement only. He announced that if he wins the Democratic nomination, he'll make the bold statement of declining the party's nod and then run as an independent. Sounds to me like even more of a reason to reject both the man and his message. He uses the Democratic Party just like his brand of socialists use the very idiots that propagate that message. Vermont state government internet sites experienced an outage this week after it was discovered that a fiber optic cable was severed by a squirrel. The internet services, which are provided by a company called First Light, went down when that bushy-tailed rodent gnawed its way through a cable somewhere between Essex and Waterbury. That resulted in an outage which lasted a little over 6 hours. Now, in the tech world, there's something called redundancy, which is generally a good thing. Redundancy is having a secondary server or a secondary communication line. In essence, a backup that will kick in and go online in the event that the primary service or the primary service provider goes offline. That redundant service was contracted to a provider called SovereignNet. But when SovereignNet merged with First Light last year, now you see where the breakdown occurred. Whoops. Hey, the state's government can't handle the complexities of ensuring their informational websites stay up and running. So why should you have any issues trusting them to running the issues of your life? And finally this week, Ben Mitchell announced that he's dropping out of Vermont's Democratic congressional race, endorsing Dan Freilich in his quest to unseat incumbent Democrat Peter Welch. Mitchell, the self-professed Democratic socialist soy boy who has advocated for the impeachment of President Donald Trump and has been a vocal Medicare for all parrot, also supported a carbon tax, but felt that there was too much corporate money sloshing around in the campaign coffers. Now, I suspect that's probably because nobody gave him any. Jealous much? As I mentioned earlier at the start of the program, we're going to forego the interview portion this week. And when YCN Vermont Wrap continues, we're going to roll right into the political potpourri portion of the program. There's a little alliteration for you, and have the much-needed discussion about civility in both our society and our politics. YCN Vermont Wrap will return right after this. Welcome back to YCN Vermont Wrap. I'm Keith Hanson. Normally, I script this part of my program. Now, as many of you are probably aware, I do 4 hours per weekday of live extemporaneous radio, both in Vermont and New Hampshire. But this is a segment that I felt I needed to do unscripted, extemporaneously, exactly as I do my radio monologues. I had something come across my desk and social media feed this past week that illustrated exactly why I believe the Republican Party, and especially the Republican Party in Vermont, has a public relations crisis on its hands. I want to introduce you to the Burlington GOP. Now, this is an organization that allegedly represents, and I put that in air fingers quotes quite purposefully, Republicans in the Burlington area. The chair of this organization is a man named Paco DeFrancis. Now, this past Friday, the Burlington GOP, and I'm going to assume was Paco DeFrancis or a spokesperson for the Burlington GOP, put out a tweet seemingly endorsing Jasdeep Panu for United States Senate. Now, the tweet reads, and I quote, "Pro-gun, pro-life, and anti-slavery. You don't get much more Republican than that. Vote Jasdeep Panu for U.S. Senate in next Tuesday's Republican primary." A man named Jay Walters, a political columnist for 7 Days Vermont, tweeted a reply that read, and I'll quote, "Shall I point out that gun owners of Vermont rates Mr. Panu as, quote, anti-gun and a fake Republican." Now, here's where the true colors of the Burlington GOP are majestically displayed in all of their elitist glory. Their reply to Walter's tweet, and now keep in mind, too, that they could have chosen to ignore that tweet. They could have deferred to Mr. Panu for a reply. But no, they got butthurt, and seemingly in a big way. And they chose to, in my humble opinion, very foolishly reply. LOL, which, by the way, if you haven't been on the internet in the past, 100 years, LOL is an internet-based acronym for laugh out loud. LOL, Go Vermont, that's represented by the acronym GOVT, is a weak and ineffective group. Their endorsements are worthless. BTV GOP, that would be the Burlington GOP, supports all Republicans. Mr. Panu has some very good plans, such as 2-year maternity leave paid for via CJ reforms. That would be criminal justice reforms. He is not a rhino. We don't approve of that term anyway. Now, here's where we really have to unpack. I'm at a loss for words on this. This is an organization that is supposed to, at least, represent Republicans. Now, I'm going to be reading off the screenshot that I have here, and I just printed a copy out for myself. GOVT is a weak and ineffective group, and their endorsements are worthless. You're going to see on the screen a screenshot of Go Vermont's Facebook page. Go Vermont reaches approximately 6,900 people via one social media page, Facebook. How many people does BTV GOP, the Burlington GOP organization, reach? Approximately 280. Now, last time I sat through first grade math, 6,900 was significantly larger than 280. In fact, 280 goes into 6,900 roughly 25 times, 24 and change. So, in essence, the organization that Burlington GOP is saying that is ineffective and worthless, well, they have 25 times the impression power that Burlington GOP has. And introducing the tweet with the LOL, Go Vermont is a weak and ineffective group whose endorsements are worthless, I would make a strong recommendation to the Burlington GOP. When an organization that has or regularly reaches 6,900 people, and let's say that of those 6,900 people, they're not seriously politically motivated, maybe they're not strong Second Amendment people, maybe they don't even live in the state of Vermont. So we'll take that, we'll chop it down, round up to 7,000, then cut that in half, 3,500 people. When you have an organization that represents 3,500 people in a state whose total population is right around 650,000, just a hint, you might want to listen to those people. Because you saying that Eddie Cutler's organization is weak and ineffective, you are negating 65 or 6,900 people, all of whom are interested in Second Amendment issues. And for a lot of these people, and I hate to say this, they're single issue voters. You piss these people off over Second Amendment issues, they're going to take their votes elsewhere. This is the exact type of politically based elitism that the vast majority of America rejected when it elected Trump. But clearly, the Burlington GOP, the Burlington Republicans, well, they don't quite see that. They look at their paltry little membership base of 280 people on social media, and they choose to look at an organization like Gun Owners of Vermont, which reaches 6,900, and in the social media world, that's impressions, by the way, 6,900 impressions, and say, you're weak, you're ineffective. In essence, poo-pooing these people off. Now, the last time that I checked, the Republican Party was a party that represented all of the ideals that made this country great. Limited government, personal responsibility. And when I use the term fair, I don't mean fair in the social justice warrior sense of the term. I mean fair in terms of recognizing that everybody be given an opportunity to succeed or fail as they may. But this level of elitism that is displayed by the Burlington GOP says nothing more than we are better than you. We're the people that wear shirts and ties in Burlington, and the rest of you gunslinging, knuckle-dragging troglodytes are the hillbillies who don't matter. This is the same elitist mentality that is expressed by Democrats when they refer to the heartland and breadbasket of this country as Air Fingers, quote, flyover country. Well, you wouldn't want to go there on purpose unless you're kissing babies and shaking hands and campaigning. That's just the area of the country that you fly over when you're going from one metropolitan tea-sipping area to the other to rub elbows with your elitist friends. And this is the same mentality that the representatives of the Republican Party in Burlington are expressing via this tweet. We need to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about the civility in other groups, and I also want to address this concept of 2-year maternity leave paid for by criminal justice reforms. You say that you don't approve of rhinos, you don't approve of the terms, but yet you're advocating for 2-year paid leave? One question before we come back. Who the hell is going to pay for that? YCN Vermont Wrap continues right after this. Welcome back to YCN Vermont Wrap. I'm Keith Hanson. Previously, we were talking about the Burlington GOP's endorsement or seeming endorsement of Mr. Panu. BTV GOP, that's Burlington GOP, supports all Republicans. Mr. Panu has some very good plans, such as a 2-year maternity leave paid for by CJ reforms, that's criminal justice reforms, which, by the way, to the best of my understanding, and if I am wrong on this, please feel free to reach out and let me know. Hanson at YCNnow.com. That's Hanson at YCNnow.com. The criminal justice reforms that they're talking about would be the taxation of marijuana. Now, remember, of course, when marijuana was legalized in the state of Vermont, they legalized it but didn't come up with a plan to regulate and tax it. Oops. Yeah, that was kind of rushed through, okay? Nothing better than a well-laid plan, but with no plan of support. If you're going to legalize a vice, you might as well make a little bit of cash off it. But no, that evidently escapes Vermont lawmakers. The one thing I do want to get into, though, is he is not a rhino. We don't approve of that term anyway, okay? Well, we could certainly say that Phil Scott, he's a Republican, but is he a rhino? Well, a lot of Second Amendment supporters would say that he is, given the fact that he signed that package of bills into law, colloquially known as S-55. Oh, but that's right, because according to the Burlington GOP, the Second Amendment supporters of this state don't matter. The 6,900 members of Go Vermont, well, they're inconsequential. They're an ineffective group. Their endorsements are worthless. Again, here's the Republican elitism that is destroying the party, and it needs to be fixed. Now, as far as the rest of civility goes, I've been watching with amazement at the online, I don't even want to call it a dialogue. I don't know what to call it. The rhetoric that is going back and forth between gubernatorial candidate on the Republican side, Keith Stern, and Democratic gubernatorial write-in candidate John Rogers. I am watching people tear themselves and tear each other apart, tearing their groups apart. There's going to come a point in time when this election is going to be over, and a governor, whether it's Hallquist, whether it's Rogers, whether it's Scott, gets selected. And I want to remind you one thing. It's a small state with small communities. And you've got bigger fish to fry than crucifying one another because one supports Stern and the other one supports Rogers. Now, I've extended opportunities for equal time to Stern. He's chosen not to come on this program. That's okay. I've done interviews with Rogers. He's got a couple of things in his voting background that some people would say are certainly less than conservative. I get that. But the bigger picture here is what happens to this state once a governor gets chosen. And I'm telling you right now, these people, you need to band together. Because there are bigger issues out there than whether or not Stern supporters left chairs at a rally, or whether or not John Rogers is posing in front of a picture of a pot plant in front of his house. There are bigger issues. We're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we're going to get right into the mailbag on this week's edition of YCN Vermont Wrap. Welcome back to YCN Vermont Wrap. I'm Keith Hanson. In this week's mailbag, Ray in Montpelier writes, quote, Keith, I enjoyed your interview with Don Turner. He seems like a good guy, and I appreciate your bringing up his voting record. Don, I want to thank you for writing in. His voting record was one of the first things that I looked into, as with any of the legislators that I speak with. In fact, 5 years worth. The voting record certainly suggests that he is a rare breed of conservative, not just in name, but also in his voting practice. Now, what I would encourage you and everybody else to do is, when you're wanting to do your homework on a candidate, check out the Ethan Allen Institute's website at ethanallen.org and just go up on the screen, click on Roll Call tab. You can search for the legislator of your choice. You can search for them by name and certainly what chamber they sit in. Pull up their voting records in a very easy to read and very easy to understand format. I'd encourage you to check it out. It is a fantastic resource that's put out by the Ethan Allen Institute. Latoya in Brattleboro is a self-described Reformed Democrat who says, quote, I used to hate people like you. Now I realize the lies the Democrat have sold to the black and Hispanics in this country. You go, guy. We've got your back. Latoya, I got to be honest, I love it when I hear a red pill story. Glad to see that the message of conservatism makes sense to you, and even happier that you've decided to take a jump into our pond. I think what you're going to find is that despite some back and forth bickering, you're going to find a truly wonderful group of people here. And saving the worst for last, Mad Max, who decided not to list his city or town, wrote, quote, "I'd love to see you stand on our town green and preach your hate. See how long you'd last." Well, Max, first off, it's not hate. Nice try, but no. Just no. Secondly, I gladly and willingly stand anywhere and extol the virtues quite vocally of limited government, personal responsibility, limited taxation, and free market capitalism. Oh, and the merits of the Constitution, which just happen to recognize my right to freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And to anyone who would try to deny me that right through violence or force, well, that's where my Second Amendment comes in. And third, Max, I hate to break this to you, pal, but you're not mad. You're not a crazy man. You're not wild. You're an intellectual dud. And I suspect a prematurely balding soy boy who's finally coming to terms with his inferiority as a beta male. So, bye-bye. This week's mailbag ratio, 13 positive and only 1 negative. Next, the only thing you've managed to accomplish is blow my perfect streak this week. That's going to do it for this week's edition of YCN Vermont Wrap. As always, be sure to share your thoughts with me about this week's program. Please make a note of the new email. That's khanson@ycnnow.com. That's khanson@ycnnow.com. Be sure to let me know the city or town that you live in as well. And be sure to follow me on Twitter @RealKeithHanson. That's @RealKeithHanson on Twitter. Tuesday is primary day. Please, everybody, get out and vote. Remember one thing. Men and women in the armed services have fought for and died for your ability to cast a vote. It's what makes this country great. One of the many things that makes America great. Please get out and vote this coming Tuesday. Have a fantastic weekend, everybody. Happy primary day. We're going to dissect that primary next weekend.